everyone, this is James versus Max, played on the 20th of October 2018. Let's dive in. So e4, c6, Caro-Kann defense. Knight c3, that's actually okay. d5. Now at this point, white should probably just play d4, transposing into an ordinary Caro-Kann defense. I don't think there's, I mean, knight f3 is also playable, but you might be allowing black to get an advanced center pawn by doing that. Okay, but instead he played d3, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of this move. I think it's a bit passive. As white, doing stuff like this is fine if you're black and you're just trying to reach a decent position. But as white, you probably should be a lot more aggressive and be looking at moves like d4. But you're not going to lose the game because of it. So let's just keep going through. Knight f3, bishop d6. Now, I paused because I looked at the engine analysis here. It says black is about half a pawn up. Then after bishop d6, it now says white is a pawn up. That's a big reversal of the analysis, and it's important to work out why. And it seems to be to do with playing the move d4 here, which, I mean, wastes a move. So it's surprising that creates such a big change in the engine. But I guess the threat is just to take this pawn for free. Whoops. And the idea, I think, is if black takes, you take with the queen, and the queen is threatening to take on g7. And how exactly does black deal with this? He can't play the natural move and put his knight in the way because of the pawn fork. So yeah, this is one of those strange examples where it's a move I wouldn't really consider wasting a move like this, but it's just very, very strong. Now, other options are pawn takes pawn, and that can be answered by this. And yeah, if this takes here, then you can just grab this bishop with something, either the queen or the pawn. They're both about the same. And what's the material? How are we going here? So takes, and it's equal material, but white has developed 2 pieces and black has developed none. So that's clearly better for white. But yeah, it's very strange. It's to do with the fact this bishop developed to d6. It's a natural looking move. But how else do you defend this pawn? If we go back a bit, it turns out that e5 was probably a bit dodgy. It's actually, according to the engine, it's fine, but yeah, after knight f3, which white played, it's tricky. The engine suggesting knight f6. Why can't white just take this pawn is the question. So when you're looking at an engine like this, you just play the move and you see what sort of response you get. In this case, the engine is saying d4, and yeah, now I can see why. Queen fork. So the idea is if this knight moves anywhere, then you've got a simple queen a5 check, forking the king and the knight. So yeah, these sorts of queen forks quite often, they're quite common when this pawn here, this c pawn is moved, releasing the queen, and when this diagonal to the king is open. So yeah, knight jumping in is actually a blunder, taking the free piece. So yeah, black can play knight f6 here, and black's got a pretty good position. I think black's doing well. It's probably about level, maybe slightly better for black. But he played bishop d6, and yeah, it turns out to be a blunder because of d4. It's quite extraordinary. The other move apparently that can be played is this, and if they take back, then you can just grab this pawn for free. So yeah, with the bishop sitting here, it interferes with the queen's defense of d5. And notice that there's no actual queen fork here because the knight can move out of danger and block the check with the same move. Yeah, so d4, that's very hard to find, but just the simple case of let's win a free pawn is pretty good, and I think white should have seen that. Okay, so white played g3 now, which gives black the option of playing d4 and fixing the position up quite a bit. Knight f6 is also quite strong, and that's actually what was played, knight f6. bishop g5. So after a bit of weirdness at the start of the game where both players, well, white in particular, could have just won a pawn, the game seems to have settled down now. So d4, knight e2, and I like black's position, to be honest. Having the advanced center pawn, and it's basically turned into a reversed King's Indian defense. And black should be quite happy with this. Black can now look to go like c5 and b5 and eventually c4 and have quite a strong attack on the queen side. So bishop g4 was played now. Bishop g2, h6 hitting the bishop. Yeah, this is all decent. Knight bd7. Yep, okay, I'm okay with that. And then c3. So it puts a bit of pressure on this d pawn here. I mean, one of the issues with playing c3 is your opponent could take it. How to take it back is the tricky thing. My first instinct is to take back with the pawn, so you've got a big mass of pawns in the center. But if you can't actually get d4 in, then this d pawn can be quite weak. But apparently taking with the bishop is also quite decent here. But black didn't take. Black just decided to play c5 and keep a big center and advance center pawn here. I think taking... the problem with taking is he takes back with the c pawn, and now the c file is open. And the question is who actually gets to use it. Sometimes it can be hard to work out. One of the problems I have with white's position is this d3 pawn is looking a bit weak, and a knight jumping into c5 can cause it problems. Not quite at the moment, but very soon that might become quite difficult. White might find himself having to play moves like knight c1 or something to keep it safe. But first things first. I mean, yeah. If white castles here, then yeah, I don't know if we can play this straight away because I think it just gets smashed away with b4. It looks like you're giving up a free pawn. But yeah, you can find that a move like queen b1 defends the pawn and attacks the knight at the same time. And where does the knight actually go? It's trapped. So, so like a move like, for example, a5 here would be what I'd be looking at, just to stop that b4 option, and then the knight can safely jump into c5. And if you can force your opponent to play a move like knight c1, that means he can't put rooks on the c file, and you can just chuck all your rooks on the c file yourself, and black will eventually end up winning. Well, end up dominating anyway. Black decided to take back with the e pawn, which I think is roughly level this position. Okay, hopefully both players castled. No, they didn't. Castling was something he should be doing right here. Okay, bishop f4. Yeah, queen a5 check. Bishop goes back. Queen c7. That's a nice maneuver. Queen a6 is probably even better, though, putting this pawn under all sorts of strain. And yeah, like a move like knight c1, and you can probably answer a move like knight e5 and put pressure on this knight and put even more pressure on this pawn at the same time. Whoops. So yeah, I mean, queen went back to here, which I think is fine. I just think sending the queen to a6 would be even stronger, and this pawn is a problem. So queen c7, castles, and the bishop went back to f4 and tried to swap a few pieces off. Oh, the knight jumped into e5. I think maybe white should be swapping all these pieces off now. Black has the advanced center pawn, which means he has more space. Whoops, black has less space. So when you've got less space, you want to trade some pieces off to uncramp your position. So something like bishop takes, and then grabbing this, and then if the queen takes, you can start looking at moves like f4, for instance. Maybe you need to play h3 first, because otherwise the queen swings to h5. And then the idea is to play f4 with quite a nice play in the center with these two pawns and trying to charge them up. For example, if stuff like this happens, then next you're going to go f4 and then maybe even g4. Whoops, e5 and f5. Okay. So I think swapping would have been good. She didn't swap though. He played rook c1. Wait, what? Okay, black's last move, knight here. It wasn't just to stop the swap off of bishops. It was actually threatening to win a piece. One two pieces attacking this knight and only one piece defending it, and white has to deal with that, so he had to take. So huge blunder by white here, rook c1. Trying to do the right thing, putting the rook on the half open file. Great idea, just don't throw away a piece in the process. So after bishop takes, knight takes. Wait, what happened back here? Black took with the wrong piece. Black took with the bishop. White could have snuck his way out of it by taking this knight. The in-between move. It's complicated, because after, bishop takes knight here, attacking the queen, he's got bishop takes bishop attacking the queen. So, yeah, black wins a piece, but he took the wrong way. If he had to take him with the knight, it's check. It doesn't give white a chance to do some sort of switch and zug. So after, takes bishop here, black is just a piece up, and I think easily winning, and threatening stuff like queen d7, queen h3, and then mates in g2. He took with the wrong piece, took with the bishop, and James missed his opportunity. He could have plowed off that knight and actually been equal. Instead, he played bishop takes here, and now knight takes, king takes. So Max took the opportunity to just trade off as many pieces as he could, because he's a piece up, which is good. The knight went back, and he's just a whole knight up, and this is looking, fairly like a fairly comfortable win for black. Okay, b4. So so white didn't panic or throw in the towel or anything. He's just using his advantages. He's got his rook on the half open file, pinning this pawn to the queen, so he's attacking that pawn. It's really good. It was defended with b6, and now rook c2, which plans to maybe double on this file with his queen and get even more pressure on that pawn. That's good stuff. a5 was played, takes, queen c1. Yeah, so I like his strategy. He's identified the backward pawn, and well, he's created a backward pawn, and now he's piling his rooks onto that pawn. It's really, really good play by white. Rook fc8, the queen went out to a3. Like that spot for the queen, that's great. It eyes both the backward pawn and the isolated pawn and gets out of the way so the rook can join in, and he can pile enormous pressure on this pawn. This is what you do when you're winning. You just get your pieces into the best positions you can and try and create some pressure, and that's really good. Really happy with this. So g5 hits a knight. Knight went back to h3. Doesn't really have much of a future on h3. Maybe e2. I'm just thinking along the lines of e2 to c1 to b3 and putting even more pressure on this pawn. They can't go to b3 though, because that interferes with the queen from defending this pawn. So it is a bit tricky. If it goes back to h3 like it did, where's it going next? That's my question. Maybe the plan is to play f4, and if takes, then knight takes, and the knight gets back into a good position again. And if it doesn't take and pushes past, you can play knight here and keep this pawn defended. So maybe h3 is okay. King f8. So it looks like I'm not sure about this move. It walks straight into a pin, so the pawn is pinned twice. Yeah, I mean black needs a plan, and I don't think this is a plan. What should black's plan be? I mean, if black can get rid of his backward c pawn, that would be the way to go. Pawn c4. I think that definitely looks like the way to play. Because the idea is if he doubles up on the pawn, knowing the pawn can't take here, the pawn can go to c3, and black ends up with a connected pass pawn. So although white's play has been really clever, putting pressure on black, I think black could just eliminate his weakness straight away with c4. Well, not to take the pawn, but to actually keep pushing past. Okay, so king f8. Yeah, I think missed his opportunity. Rook fc1. There we go. There's a lot of pressure on that pawn now, and it needs a bit of defending. So this knight dropped back here to defend the pawn. And f4. Okay, yep, that's great. G takes f4, G takes f4, knight g4. Okay, sneaky, threatening a very annoying knight fork. So the king moved to g3. I think f3 is a little bit better, because that leaves the G file open so that rooks and queens can swing over to this file and maybe get at that king instead. King G3 just seems to get in the way and walks into a pin. Okay, knight E3, rook F2. Yeah, it looks like black is managed to almost fix his position. He just needs to get his king off this pin so he can push this pawn and get rid of his backward pawn. So he did. He played king G7, but it's walking straight onto the G file. I think it's okay. So king F3. So yeah, we see that king G3 was a mistake, and James noticed that, and he's put his king on F3 now. Now he's got, checks and ways to get into the enemy position this way. Black trying to do the right thing. Plays C4, getting rid of his backward C pawn. Now he can push C3 next move and have the advanced have the connected pass pawn. F5 was played now. That apparently, according to the engine, is a massive mistake because it allows knight to E5, and I have to agree with that. After knight E5 check, the king moves, the knight can then look to maybe jump into here if it wants to and just take this pawn. So after king G3, simple knight takes D3 is just very powerful. So F5 was a blunder. Luckily for white, black didn't see it and instead did this. Oh, I think he saw the idea of a knight fork. I think he was thinking along the lines of, if the queen takes a pawn, he can go knight here with the knight fork, winning the queen. I think that's my guess as to what he was thinking in his brain. He got too excited by the idea and forgot that that pawn is pinned to the queen. The rook just lost his queen. So very unfortunate blunder. Either that or he was hit by a touch move rule or something. I don't know, touch take. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's just a tragedy for black, who I thought did an incredibly good job this game. But well done to white for not giving up and keeping pressure on black throughout the game. So after c takes, rook takes c7, rook takes, this game is pretty much over, I think. But white played queen d3. No, what? Walking straight into the trap that black suggested in the first, black was going for in the first place. And here's the really strange thing: black didn't play it. After knight e5, black is just winning. He gets his queen back, and he's just got like a whole rook up. Instead of playing knight e5, he played rook c3. I think he saw another tactical idea and got excited by that idea, thinking that the queen will have to move somewhere. Let's say it moves there, and then suddenly you've got knight here with discovered check on the king, winning the queen. Unfortunately, after rook c3, just queen takes d4 check with a queen fork hitting the king and the rook. The king, once the king gets out of check somehow, the knight moves in the way or something, the queen just grabs the rook, and that's it, game over. And so after queen d4, black resigned. Wow, what a comedy of errors at the end there. Some very strange stuff. So this was a blunder. Whoops, f5 was a blunder because it allows knight here and then grabs the pawn with the knight fork. So it's really brilliant. It's knight fork followed by knight fork. Really great stuff. Black missed it. Responded by opening up the pin, allowing white to just take a free queen. But then white immediately offers black a knight fork, which black misses, trying to go for some sneaky discovered check. Unfortunately, walking straight into a queen fork. Wow. The craziness of those tactics at the end there just kind of means the game was a bit of a coin toss at the end. Both players were missing tactics left, right, and center. I'd love to know what time was on their clocks. Maybe they were both getting short on time and they were rushing their moves a bit. I'm not entirely sure. But entertaining game, and I think quite a few things to learn there. So hope you all enjoyed that, and that's it for now. Goodbye.